Blake Nestle. I think Tim Pool puts it very well in this video, particularly about the Gelman amnesia effect, but I'll reiterate for the sake of a question format. The link is to a clip where Brian Williams and Mara Gay are discussing the amount of money Bloomberg spent on his election campaign, and a glaring mistake in basic math is made and pontificated on at length, lamenting the nature of money in politics. If mainstream media, as Brian Williams and an editorial board member of the New York Times certainly are, can make this caliber of mistake on a concept most humans master by age 8, then how can we possibly trust them on issues of great complexity and nuance? I realize on the surface this just looks like an unfortunate gaffe. But I mean, come on, they had a graphic queued up for this with a mistake in simple long division that made it past all the vetting of MSNBC and then was repeated by an anchor that has read news for over a decade, and ironically, a person whose job in journalism is editing for one of the largest newspapers in the US. And I'm supposed to look to these people for accurate information and to fulfill the role of the Fourth Estate? Hey Blake, all right, well first off, I'm the last person who's going to defend cable news or it's the accuracy thereof of these institutions because I believe that they are mainly propaganda tools at this point for whatever editorial slants or views the highest bidder, the advertisers, or the owners of the stations want to push forward onto the public. I look at cable news now as a form of mass propaganda, not a form of mass information. So I kind of am on the same page you are in terms of an attitude towards these people that is full of doubt and reservations about what their actual intentions and objectives are, given the fact that they feed us a lot of half-truths and false information or very, very slanted information. Every story has a spin. Every story has some moral connected to it. And journalism kind of lost at some point, or it never really had it in the first place, and we're just sort of delusionally imagining that news used to be more objective. But I believe it did, and I think that there were rules for it. I mean, I've seen old reels of Walter Cronkite or other old famous news paragons giving out their daily news, and they were not emotional about it, and they didn't try to spin it, and they didn't try to add some moral foundation to what they were doing. They were telling you about the events of the world as they unfolded that day. And that's really what we need in news, which is why local news tends to be better because it's right there on, and it has more of an effect on your day-to-day life than the national, dog and pony news show that we get from the federal level tends to be. And I think that's probably true across the world, but certainly I can speak to that, here in the United States. So I've got all kinds of criticisms of the Fourth Estate, as you put it, and I'm not shy about voicing those criticisms. At the same time, I understand the value and nature of a free press to any free society, and we have to have it. If we do not have it, then we do not have that additional check on the institutions of power that rule our country. And unchecked, those institutions will abuse us without question. And so having a free and open media that can kind of do what it should be doing of informing the public, asking difficult questions, looking into the nooks and crannies of society and reporting on what they find, even slanted, I'd rather have that than have nothing. I want to be super clear about that. As critical and, condemnatory as I can be about some of these news stations and what they're doing, I will absolutely defend their existence all the way. I'll take that argument all the way because we need them. We need them to do better, but we do need them. Okay, so that being said, let me clarify a couple things on this particular story. Some of you guys might have heard or seen some of this. Maybe some of you didn't, but Brian Williams, they gave this whole news story, and their math was completely wrong. So let me go over a few things, and I wrote some stuff down so I could do this accurately. First off, you mentioned this, Tim Pool mentions in his video critique of this whole thing, where he goes on, He talks about the Gelman amnesia effect, which you also referenced in your question. Let me clarify what that is for the audience, because it's actually not. It's just something that Michael Crichton made up. Michael Crichton, the guy who wrote Jurassic Park and the Andromeda Strain and many other stories. This is quoted from Wikipedia, my favorite place to find stuff, because it's the easiest thing for you guys to use to find stuff too. It's one of the reasons I use it, because it's so easy for you guys to find it too. Here's the quote. In a speech in 2002, Crichton coined the term Gell-Mann amnesia effect. So it's Gell-MANN effect, or amnesia effect. He used this term to describe the phenomenon of experts believing news articles on topics outside of their field of expertise, even after acknowledging that articles written in the same publication that are within the expert's field of expertise are error-ridden and full of misunderstanding. He explains the irony of the term, saying that it came about because I once discussed it with Murray Gell-Mann. And by dropping a famous name, I imply greater importance to myself and to the effect than it would otherwise have. End quote. So Michael Crichton just made this up. This is not like an actual psychological thing, but it's something you can observe that happens sometimes. And he sort of called it the Gell-Mann effect, or amnesia effect. Okay, what you're actually seeing in play here with Brian Williams and this person from the New York Times editorial board or whatever is a couple things. First thing that occurred to me is you're seeing confirmation bias in play, okay? And this is a really important part of psychology to understand, and the power of it is mind-numbing, actually, how powerful this can be, because it can actually alter your perceptions. And you can make stupid gaffes like Brian Williams and Mara Gay made, because you're not actually seeing what's in front of you. You're seeing what you think you should be seeing instead of what you're actually seeing. You got to remember that just because something's in front of your face doesn't mean that this information, a carbon copy of it, goes into your brain and is processed accordingly. That's not how this works. You will perceive what you think you should be perceiving, not necessarily what you are perceiving objectively. This is how this can screw with you, because it goes through various filters up here. Yeah, it's that crazy. So this is called confirmation bias. You have a bias that you want to confirm. And in this case, these guys were clearly confirming that too much money was spent in politics. Bloomberg was off the rails. He was spending so much money that he could have done so much more with that money instead of wasting it on a presidential race he was absolutely not going to win. And why was he doing this? And so there's all this bias inherent there. And then this tweet comes in, and these guys look at it and go, oh yeah. Yeah, they do whatever their little calculation is, but the calculation's based on their confirmation bias, not on the objective reality of what they see. Okay, so that's one problem, right? Another one that this falls into, and the criticism of this also falls into, is fundamental attribution error. And this is also another one of these very, very powerful, very fundamental, very basic to our way of thinking and how we form opinions in the first place. This is how fundamental this is, and that's why it's called fundamental attribution error. And let me read to you a bit some things I clipped on this so that you get what I'm talking about. The fundamental attribution error is the tendency people have to overemphasize personal characteristics and ignore situational factors in judging others' behavior. As a simple example of the behavior which attribution error theory seeks to explain, consider the situation where Alice, a driver, is cut off in traffic by Bob. Alice attributes Bob's behavior to his fundamental personality. For example, he thinks only of himself. He's selfish. He is a jerk. He is an unskilled driver. Alice does not think it is situational. For example, he's going to miss his flight. His wife is giving birth at the hospital. His daughter is convulsing at school. These are situations. They're not something that's just in his head. But Alice will assign all the problems to what's in his head. Consider, too, the situation where Alice makes the same mistake. She cuts somebody off. And she excuses herself by saying she was influenced by situational causes. For example, I'm late for my job interview. I must pick up my son for his dental appointment. She does not think she has a character flaw. She doesn't think she's a jerk, right? She treats others like they're jerks. She assumes they're the jerks, and she does not look at the situation when it comes to other people. With herself, she doesn't look at herself poorly. She looks at the situations of her life because she is very, very aware of those situations. You can't see the situation going on with Bob when he cuts you off in traffic. You got no idea why he did that. And so you assume why he did it, and pretty much all of us assume that it's because he's a jerk, right? We assign it to his personality. And in this critique of Brian Williams and Mara Gay and this whole story that Tim Pool did, I have to cite fundamental attribution error on his part. He keeps calling these people stupid. Well, Brian Williams is a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them. And Mara Gay is a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them. Sean Hannity is a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them. And yet we use that word, among many, many other personally insulting words, to describe these people all the time because we disagree with them because of our confirmation bias. And that feeds our fundamental attribution error tendency. And so we end up talking about people in ways that have nothing to do with reality, but have everything to do with how we think reality is because we make all these assumptions about people. And, I am going to obviously admit that I'm at the head of the line of people who make these mistakes. So just knowing about them all by itself isn't proof against making these errors. And they are logical errors. They are problems in our ability to think rationally. And that's, kind of a lot of what's going on with the critique of this story. So where do we end up? Well, we end up with fallible human beings who do fallible things and make mistakes. And if we take one example of that and blow it into how can I possibly trust these people, then we ourselves are contributing to the logical fallacies of the situation. Because it's a one-off. It is a gaffe, right? It's somebody screwing up, and there are reasons they screwed up. I'm explaining the psychological reasons for that. There are institutional reasons as well. You are right. All that made it through a whole bunch of people before it got onto the screen. Sometimes you might be surprised how few people it has to go through before it goes on air. But, even 2 or 3, somebody should have caught that math error. I mean, I'm not excusing that. It was stupid. It was a stupid error. But that doesn't mean Brian Williams is a stupid person. You see the difference? It's a big one, and it's an important one. This is why we have to, when we examine this kind of thing, as a critical thinker, as a skeptic, or somebody who's using reason, we have to look at percentages. We have to go to statistics then to answer the question of, because you asked me, Blake, how am I supposed to rely on these people for information? And it's a good question because in these very slanted times where we have this, really, it's sort of what I like to call neon yellow journalism. Actually, this is the first time I'm saying it publicly. I came up with it a few days ago. I like to say it now. You had yellow journalism, right? The old William Randolph Hearst stuff from the early 1900s, where you want a war, I'll give you a war, right? I'll make the war. Well, now you have neon yellow journalism because it's all digital, right? But it's the same stuff, right? You still got that going on. And I don't know if there's ever been a time where media hasn't had some kind of slant. But this is why you have to go to the fact checkers and you got to look and see who's telling me the truth more often than not. And it's not like you can then just go with that one source. You have to multi-source. You have to get if you want to accurately assess a situation or information, you need multiple sources of information about it, right? Because different people have different views, different levels of expertise affect their views. And so, for example, you'd go to a doctor to find out about symptoms of coronavirus. You wouldn't go to your butcher. Okay. Statistically speaking, the butcher might be right sometimes, but the doctor's going to be right more often. Now, does that mean that that doctor can always be relied on for any information about anything? Well, obviously not. Can that doctor be relied on for 100% accurate information about medical things? No. Can the doctor even be relied on for 100% accurate information on the line of his specialty? No. But you will find, if you were to graph statistically the accuracy of this doctor on these various points, you'd find that the graph would go like this, right? Things he doesn't know anything about, things having to do with medicine, he's going to have a higher percentage of accuracy, and things that have to do with his specialty will be much higher. But they won't be 100% because he's human. And he's going to make mistakes. He's going to make every mistake you can make. Well, news organizations are just a bunch of people at the end of the day, and you get the cumulative effect of all of their mistakes, and then you get the cumulative effect of all of the half-truths and the editorial slants where actual lies are told. This is propaganda. This is why I use that word propaganda, right? Because it's not news news and propaganda are two different things, and where they mix, we get the mess that we have. So, where I'm going with this is that there is no one source of information that is always going to give you the accurate details of things, but there are sources of information that you can grade with fact-checking to see, right, from when third parties objectively fact-check these sources of news, what they find, from what I could find, is that Fox News is the worst, and MSNBC is, a little bit less, and CNN is a bit more accurate than that. Okay, and you can look up these statistics and you can find them over time and check the fact checking and do that work for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what all the numbers and everything are. I'm just going to say that was the sequence of it. And Fox News came out really bad. I mean, they were pretty slanted stuff. But that doesn't mean CNN had their shit together either, and MSNBC even less so. And those are all the cable news, right? Then you got to go to local news and, other countries' news and, whatever. Point is, look and see what the accuracy rating for these groups and these news stations are and go with the ones that are the most accurate most of the time. And even then, sorry, but it's the world we live in that you got to fact check your news. It sucks. It's inconvenient. It's inconvenient in many, many ways at many levels. But it is the world we live in. And this is why that I think critical thinking is so important to understanding the world we live in. And I don't really want to pontificate. I hope I'm not coming across as pontificating here. I'm just trying to give you, my view on these things and how I approach it. But I'm not canceling news. I'm not saying all news sucks. I think it's pretty clear that we need the news, but we need to be critical of the news and we need to be skeptical of the news because of the world we live in. And that's my take on all of that. I hope that was helpful or illuminating in some fashion.